Fox News alert, border agents arrest an MS-13 gang member traveling apparently with one of the migrant caravans as the Department of Homeland Security warns this problem will only get worse.
Rodney Scott is the chief patrol agent at the San Diego sector, U.S. Border Patrol. He joins us now with the latest. Rodney, I'm watching last night and I'm seeing that the wall's been effective really since Sunday as a deterrent. But it turns out there's a whole group going around the wall. How far do they have to travel to get around that barrier?
So that's a great question. Again, thank you for having me on this morning. We're in the process here in San Diego of upgrading a legacy dilapidated scrap metal fence with a new border wall, but that project is ongoing. So currently, within a couple hundred yards of the San Ysidro port of entry going to the east, we have that old fence that's only a few feet high. Then we have about 9 miles of the new border wall completed. And then again, less than 14 miles away from the beach, we have no fencing whatsoever.
Unbelievable. It's inexcusable.
Let's talk a little bit about this member who he identified himself as, I used to be in MS-13. 29-year-old Jose Villalobos Jobel, apparently from Honduras. He was caught over in Calexico area, El Centro sector. Was he part of the caravan in Tijuana and just went out that way, or from one of the other caravans?
No, it's hard to say, to be quite honest. One of the best ways we identify the caravan members is by their own admission. We do work with the government of Mexico and a lot of NGOs to try to get more evidence behind that, but for the most part, it's based on their own statements.
Okay, we know.
My belief. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So let's talk about some of the troops that are down there, because the president says he might extend deployment for thousands of active duty troops. We were told they were going to be able to go home for Christmas, and he says if the problem still exists there, because some of these migrant workers say they're going to be there for months because they can't get asylum or can't be processed that quickly to get through to the United States. He says that he might have to keep the troops down there till January. Can you elaborate on this?
So I can't really speak to the negotiations between DOD and DHS. My job as the chief here is to outline my requirements. The situation here is actually worse than it was last Sunday. Another 1,200 migrants have showed up in Tijuana. We've also started to get into our rainy season. It's actually raining right now in San Diego, which is fairly rare, and it's starting to cool off. So we're going to monitor the situation daily, and I'll push my requirements up to Washington, D.C. and let them negotiate that.
So we know they said there's about 600 criminals within these caravans, and then we find out one of them is MS-13. What do your reconnaissance tell you about who else might be in there?
So I want to highlight the 600 criminals as well. There's a lot of law enforcement techniques on how we figure that out, but those are primarily people that have been in the United States in the past, and we've been able to get some kind of a criminal history on them. Getting criminal history on individuals in other countries is quite difficult, and also it's by admission. So we had the MS-13 member you mentioned. There's another 18th Street gang member, self-professed, claims to have murdered somebody and been in prison before, but tracking down those records is difficult.
Yeah. Chief, over the weekend, of course, that's when hundreds of migrants ran toward the U.S. border. A number of them threw projectiles or rocks at the agents, the Border Patrol agents there. What's the reaction to the agents there in your sector about perhaps another encounter like that?
So we're preparing accordingly. We watched this migrant caravan, which is different than any other just by volume and the propensity for violence. We watched them violently push across 2 international borders and come up through Mexico. So we did significant intel briefings with our personnel and made sure that we were ready with the right equipment. And then we're basing off of Sunday. We've made some adjustments to our enforcement, and we're going to be ready if it comes back again.
Okay. All right.
Do you mind if I ask what adjustments? Can you talk about that you've made?
I won't get into the specifics, but in every incident like this, we do a quick after-action review. We've identified some vulnerabilities in the border that the Department of Defense is helping us mitigate currently, as I speak, actually. We've also looked at our deployment methods and the hot spots. Working with our partners in Mexico, we're trying to make sure we have Mexican police pre-deployed in some of our more vulnerable areas. You saw the Tijuana River Channel, where there's really no border barrier at all. that's one of the areas that we're trying to make sure that we have a 24/7 presence.
Sure.
And then we also have 24-hour surveillance, aerial surveillance over the area now, so we can see any movement of personnel.
You're basically saying, hey, you'll do the best job you possibly can, but it would certainly help to have some type of physical barrier there to aid you in your effort, and Congress just can't get their act together. Rodney Scott, thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the time.